it's been hard, but we're pushing through.
It was very surreal. It felt like a movie set.
How was I going to tell everyone? How did I get it?
I think about the stress. I think about the times of blinding panic.
We didn't know it was going to get this bad. We had no idea what we were in for.
I remember in the early days, before we really knew what this pandemic was going to turn out to be, I covered a lot of press conferences with New Jersey state officials.
It became dire, a little surreal. I remember a couple photographers were looking at each other like, is this really happening? This is starting to get serious now.
We were in a fairly small room that was packed full of people.
And then when they start announcing restrictions about people not being allowed out anymore or limited capacity in places, and there's this jam-packed room full of reporters and photographers who are looking at each other like, should we be here?
It looks so strange to look back on it now, to see this packed room full of officials and reporters, no masks on, no social distancing. That wasn't a thing yet.
Soon after, no reporters were allowed inside, only photographers. And then it became no one was allowed inside.
I remember wondering, is it really going to get that bad?
That every time I checked my phone, something was being canceled. Another restriction was happening. It's like the world just kept bottoming out. You didn't think that anything else could happen, and it just kept happening.
My manager said, don't get too close to anyone, and if they look sick, don't interview them. And I remember thinking, what? We'll be fine. This isn't that big of a deal. We'll be okay. And little did I know, that was just the beginning of this very strange, surreal time that we're all living in the pandemic.
I remember reporting on the first cases coming from New York City into northern New Jersey.
A second presumptive case.
Case by case, it slowly started to trickle down to our part of the state.
New Jersey is up to 69. That's up 19 cases.
As soon as we started seeing those numbers jump up, and as soon as we started seeing it spread, I was overwhelmed by seeing so much.
Working out in the streets has not been easiest because you're worried about everything you touch, everyone you come in contact with. People come over to you, pull their mask down, and start talking to you. It was hard and scary, especially early on.
I distinctly remember one day there was a staffer from the governor's office who would come around to each reporter with a microphone as we would ask questions. And the one day he started wearing gloves. And I have this one picture that I vividly remember taking because his gloved hand was right in front of my face with the microphone. And it was just one of those, okay, this is getting weird moments.
We usually, you hold a microphone like this, right? But we needed some distance, that's 6 feet of distance. So my coworker, Jackie, and I came up with a way to rig the microphone onto an umbrella. And we extended it, and that's how we did our interviews until we got the big boom mics that you see, reporters with now.
We were at a suburban station, and it was rush hour, and we were doing a story on transportation. And I just remember looking around, and it was just a ghost town. I mean, normally it was rush hour, morning rush. There would be people scurrying everywhere and getting to work and saying, oh, I'm too busy to talk, and just kind of getting on their merry way. And it was so quiet. I mean, you could practically see the tumbleweed. And I think that was a sign of things to come. The city was emptying out.
So I was the first one that got sick, so it was definitely a big deal. How was I going to tell everyone? How did I get it? How was I going to feel? These were all questions that started lingering and circulating in my mind. Of course, at the same time, I was actually getting worse and worse.
We're now in the medical tent in Montgomery County, where I'll be tested.
Started with a fever, the chills, pretty much everything that you've read about, I experienced.
Head hurts, eyes hurt, and breathing is not so great.
After I started to feel better and I let everyone, my bosses, know that I was able to go back to work, I was like, what's that first day on air going to be like? And I put on a suit, I did my live shot, and it just kind of felt surreal to have to tell my story again. And I'll never forget that moment where Jim makes a comment about my beard that I grew while I was in quarantine.
Dare I say it, you look pretty good with facial hair. I don't know if that's something you want to consider.
And, you know, just that little moment, that small little segment of levity just kind of made it seem okay. Like I was gonna be fine, you know, it wasn't so serious anymore now that I had recovered. But of course, obviously, as we knew, that from that point forward, there was just so much more that had to happen and still happens with coronavirus cases. Here we are with the vaccine now. And yeah, that's just, it's kind of crazy to reflect on just that point in time to where we are now.
The toughest stories were those families that lost their loved ones, who couldn't say goodbye in person, who had to FaceTime with their loved ones in a hospital and say goodbye. Just recently, I interviewed a man who lost 4 of his family members who all lived with him. And it was just devastating to hear that within a period of less than 2 months, he went from living in a house with 4 other people to being alone.
I remember going to Bear, Delaware when a tornado touched down and talking to families who survived but saw their house literally get ripped off. I remember the most emotional interview with someone named Joseph Hicks. He and his family were the sweetest people, and they lost their whole house.
God spared my wife, and my boys, so we're here.
In a weird way, like we hadn't had those weather stories in a while, so it was almost like a weird reprieve from COVID, but then of course it was remembering you lost your house in the middle of a pandemic.
It was a time that my family was going through a lot. My husband's mother was ill. She'd been battling cancer, and COVID really impacted that entire process. There was a point where, you know, she was in a rehabilitation facility, and before COVID, I would take the kids every day after school to go and see her. But then COVID came and we couldn't go see her. We couldn't get into the nursing home. We had to be outside of a window and call on the phone to hear her and to talk with the kids. And we missed that interaction, especially knowing that she may not be with us for much longer. And even after she got out of the nursing home, there was still so much fear. There was so much fear because she was sick. So even when she was home, we couldn't hug her. My children couldn't hug their grandma because of COVID. And we didn't know how much longer she'd be with us. But we were too scared to let them hug her because she had cancer. So that's something that we missed. We missed those last months. We missed those last months to really be with her in the way we wanted to because of COVID. We couldn't have a memorial service the way we wanted to with all the loved ones, with everyone. And that was really difficult.
You also have to try to find the good things. And one of my favorite stories that we covered this year is little Abby. And I think about Abby because she is what I aspire to be. She is the epitome of perseverance. Abby Sostek from Eagleville, 2 years old. This little girl has Down syndrome. She needed 6 different types of therapy, which due to the pandemic were all virtual. Her amazing parents, Vicky and Danny, under the guidance of physical therapists, used 2 bar stools, duct tape, and Danny's 5-iron to fashion around a treadmill. They put on Sesame Street on the iPad, and just like the champion she is, she put one foot in front of the other and she just kept going. Her family kept going. This is a year, I said this before, that I had to tell myself this entire time, just keep going. Wherever you are, just put one foot in front of the other. So I looked at Abby and I think about her smile and her determination, and I try to channel that because I think it is important to know that there are brighter days ahead. We just have to get there. We just have to keep going.
You're talking to these COVID survivors who somehow made it through and had this amazing outlook on life. I mean, I remember I went to Delaware to talk to a beloved dance teacher who survived, and her community was surprising her with this homecoming party.
Veronica McAleer was supposed to be the grand marshal of a different kind of parade on St. Patrick's Day in Wilmington.
And I remember, like, I started crying when she came because you could hear all the honking and the cheering, and you thought about how powerful it was to be able to be COVID-19 and then to have so many loved ones stand by you and support you. That was definitely really emotional.
Thank you.
There's a camaraderie that comes with news, and I think not being able to be there with each other was kind of hard.
It has been a challenging year. I miss seeing a lot of my coworkers. I just hope we all get through this.
I'm so grateful for the photographers, the colleagues that I can actually see in person. Being able to lean on them has meant so much because I know that they've been going through all of this with me. They have helped me tell some of these crucial stories, and I will always think of them when I think about this time in my career.
You know, that my colleagues are, out there every single day on the front lines, working to share the community stories about their experiences with COVID day in and day out. We don't take that responsibility lightly. We know how difficult it is to open up to strangers and share your concerns, your woes, and to be trusted with that. There's no other job, career like it.